Aquaba, welcome. Hello, happy Sunday. We hope that you are reaching your highest level of mental, physical, and spiritual strength today. And we welcome you to this week's episode of Our Ancestors' Voices, a weekly program sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party. And today, August 18th, we commemorate the August 17th born day of Marcus Mosiah Garvey and his wonderful contributions, his wonderful Pan-African contributions. And so we're glad that you are here to join us for this outstanding recognition of an ancestor who has made his proper contribution to our people's forward progress. And we give thanks and honor to the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere for their caretaking and their continued work to regain their dignity. As they regain their dignity, that, whether we know it or not, or whether we want it to be the case or not, contributes to us and our struggle to regain our dignity. Because the number one force that's oppressing the indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere is the same international capitalist imperialist network that oppresses the African masses. So they cannot win unless we win. We cannot win unless they win. So we, of course, wish them and stand with them in their struggle for justice. And right along those lines, we do the same in terms of issuing respect and appreciation to our African ancestors, of which today we're going to honor one of our giants in our history, one of our giant ancestors. So we are proud to be able to do our absolute best to carry on the legacy of our ancestors who sacrificed so much for us to be free. And before we got started, Shakur was telling me, folks, and I hear this all the time, they tell me, I don't know how you do it. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do this work. And I was, telling her, as she laughed, that my response to them is, yeah, I'm just glad our ancestors didn't have your selfish attitude, because if they had thought about it the same way you think about it today, we'd be in chains. And still today, physical chains in 2024. If our ancestors had that kind of selfish, entitled attitude that so many of us have today. And not only that, but people love to talk about, well, if I was alive in slavery times, I would have did this or did that. You can, the best judge for what you would have done during those times is what you're doing right now. If you're not doing a damn thing right now, then you wouldn't have been doing a damn thing then, except when the master said, go fetch that bale of cotton. Yes, sir, boss, I'll go get it. And you would have gone and got it, just like you go and get it today, the equivalent of it today. So we are acknowledging the real ancestors, the ones who stand on truth and justice and who are constantly working to give us the courage to continue this fight. And so we start, as we always do, just by introducing who we are. For those that may not know, Our Ancestors' Voices is sponsored by the All African People's Revolutionary Party, AAPRP. The AAPRP is a revolutionary, independent, mass Pan-African political party with its base in Africa. And our objective is Pan-Africanism, which we define correctly as one unified socialist Africa, a United States of Africa, not America, of Africa. And our work to achieve Pan-Africanism is outlined in Kwame Nkrumah's Handbook of Revolutionary Warfare. If you're looking at a screen and you see it there in the center, it lays out the strategy of uniting all of the revolutionary Pan-African formations on the ground in Africa into one worldwide fighting force. And we are convinced that this definition of Pan-Africanism, one unified socialist Africa, once achieved, will resolve so many of the problems we face as a people worldwide, because we will be in control of our destiny. And I would argue the primary problem we have today is we're obviously not in control of our destiny, and we're not respected, because nobody's going to respect anybody that's not in control of their own destiny. And we don't respect each other, because nobody's going to respect anybody that's not in control of their own destiny. So Pan-Africanism puts us in the driver's seat to determine our destiny. And that's why we believe that it is the solution to our problems. And Our Ancestors' Voices is hosted each week by myself, Ajamu, and Shukura. We are both active organizers in the APRP, and she is my biological and ideological comrade, biological daughter and ideological comrade. So to get us started, I will turn it over to Shukura.
Thank you. Greetings, everyone. We hope you are well, and we hope you are excited to give homage and to pay tribute to our comrade, Marcus Garvey, today. So, we have so many reasons to give thanks for this comrade's legacy, the initiation of the UNIA organization, as well as the creation of the red, black, and green flag, the ACL organization. I mean, there's so many different ways to acknowledge what this comrade did for Africans everywhere. And so the UNIA organization is the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Universal Negro Improvement, Association, founded by Marcus Garvey, as well as Amy Ashwood Garvey in Jamaica in 1914. It became one of the largest African organizations that was assembled. And what I love about the UNIA and the legacy that it has left is there were millions of members in over 30 countries, you all, who were a part of this organization. Over 1 million members in 30 different countries who were members of this fine organization. And so when we think about what legacy looks like, when we think about what it means to be committed to the craft, committed to your values, your principles, to be unobjective about how you were going to go about, not unobjective, excuse me, objective about how you're going to go about moving into a space of being committed to what it is you believe in, what it is you're going to stand for, and not being subjective, being able to stand up for that and being able to defend that in case people critique it, in case people want to ask questions about it, if they want to raise information about it, excuse me, and you're in a position where you can give clarity on that. Being able to see how important it is to really organize and to be consistent and to understand that the organization that you might start, because you know we're going to remind you the importance of joining an organization that's working for justice or starting an organization that is working for justice. So if you're thinking about doing one or the other, make sure you understand that the organization you're considering to join or to start, it may not even be in the same area that you live in. You may be able to join an organization with primarily people who are organizing in another part of the world. And the UNIA reminds me a lot of the All African People's Revolutionary Party, because I don't currently live in Africa. I look forward to one day, but right now I am in the colonized land of Cherokee, which was colonized as Memphis, Tennessee. And so because we know that the All African People's Revolutionary Party is based and established out of Africa, that is a prime example of how we have members as well as chapters all over the world, from Europe to the US, Canada. We've got folks obviously in Africa and different countries that are organizing on the continent. And it's really beautiful to think about that, because even with us organizing in the capacity that we're organizing in, we have comrades and connections with sibling organizations that are in Australia and that are in other parts of the world where we're starting to get more traction and gain more of a foundation. And so just being able to see the importance of organizing. This is why we say every weekend, and it's so important. We are not insistent of you joining our organization. We're just asking you to join some organization that is working for justice, because being able to make those connections, when it comes down to it, we're going to be able to join forces. We're going to be able to unite as different organizations. Ultimately, we're probably not going to all have the same intention and the same vision in terms of what we want and why that organization exists, but we all are fighting for justice for people everywhere. We're all fighting for people to be able to have a quality of life and to be able to live decently without having to worry about any type of oppression affecting them. And if that is the intention that all these organizations are setting, then we're going to be so powerful. because of our joined forces and because of us being able to come together. And so, again, just thinking about the legacy that Garvey has left us. And I think so much about Garvey and Garveyism when we read that book for work study, and how I was so mesmerized by the humility that this comrade laid out in terms of their travels around the world, of course, being born in Jamaica and seeing this connection all around the world. First starting in Jamaica and seeing how Africans were struggling, and then moving to other parts of the world, coming to the US and seeing the issue here as well. And then going to some other parts. I think he traveled to the Caribbean at one point and did something else. And he may have even have gone to Europe and saw that we were struggling. And he made the connection that we are not doing well anywhere. It's not just Jamaica. It's not just the US. And so I just really love that he was able to draw those connections, because that's what we have heard from Malcolm X. That's what we've heard from Kwame Nkrumah. That's what we've heard from different people, Sekou Touré, all around, who are saying that the problem didn't start, in the US. It started out of Africa when Africa was exploited and robbed, and the people themselves were kidnapped, right? And so being able to understand this, I think we can have a better function of being in a position where we can say to ourselves, Marcus Garvey was very clear about why the Universal Negro Improvement Association needed to exist and what type of functionality it could service for people everywhere, because he was able to use through the UNIA ways to communicate by creating the newsletter, printing it in different languages, so that no matter what colonized oppressor we suffered from, we were able to read that newsletter and get information. That was another way that he was able to connect us. And like I said, when we think about the red, black, and green flag, just think about how different the world would be if we didn't have it. And really understanding what the purpose of each color was. He took so much time and effort to come up with that. And do you think he created the flag because he wanted to get recognition for it? No, he created the flag because he was trying to think of more ways to unify us. He wanted us to understand that we had a purpose together as a people, not individually. And now we can look at the Pan Africanism flag and think about how the red, standing for the blood of our people, the green, standing for the land, the African soil that we have, and the black, representing the people, the culture, our love for each other, our humanism for each other, what makes us us, how unique we are compared to so many other people, and why we shouldn't have to change who we are or be ashamed of who we are. Those three colors coming together truly signifies that we can take down colonial borders, that we can take down colonialism and decenter what the impacts of that have been on us. And so we just give so much honor and respect to the work of Garvey as well as Garvey's partners. I'm thinking of the first Amy as well as the second partner that he married that was named Amy, and how we were able to get more information because of Garvey and Garveyism. Great book if you haven't read it. And being able to continue on his legacy and thinking about how we can still make a difference and take the baton that he has passed to us. Next slide, please. The UNIA has been so instrumental in informing other organizations for how they function and really helping us to get more of an idea of why it's important not just to organize locally, as I said, but to branch out and figure out ways to reach and connect with people in other regions that you may not otherwise have access to. This comrade was able to do so much with the Negro world, right? And so, of course, this is before the internet, this is before social media. So, again, just taking some humility from him and really thinking about how we can use some of the resources that we have today, because things are so much more advanced, to try to really organize and improve the conditions for people everywhere. We say all the time that even if you are not ready to join an organization that's working for justice, you should definitely be thinking about ways that you can support us. So if you want to support a Pan-Africanist organization, maybe it means offering your skill sets. If you're able to manage data sets and you can, keep up with the contacts that people have, and you're able to send out messages through a certain server or whatnot. If you're good at web page design, if you're good at speaking at events, if you're good at organizing food and hospitality, I mean, you have to look inside yourself to figure out what your skill set is. You have to figure that out. We won't be able to tell you that, but we know that we need more support. We can tell you that. And we know that it's going to take many, many, many more of us to be able to do the kind of work that we're trying to do. This seminar is one way that we are trying to improve the conditions for people everywhere. And you joining us today is awesome and spectacular. But if there is more that you can be doing, we're asking you to consider what that looks like, because Garvey was not someone who just sat down and said, okay, I've created a newsletter that was printed in several different languages. That's enough. Then he said, okay, I'm going to try to figure out how I can do this. And I need to figure out how we can increase membership and get more people to join. I need to figure out how I can get the word out and get more information. And at some point, I am going to start this Black Star line and help my comrades get back home. I mean, this brother was out there, you all. He did not stop because he thought that his work was enough. He was constantly trying to do as much as he could to address the conditions that our people were facing. All we can do is respect that, and we can learn from it. And as I said, we can try our best to follow in his footsteps. We can think about the artificial barriers of what it looks like of our violent colonial experiences and how we can't let them define us. This is why it's important for us to take down those colonial borders. I talk to my friends all the time, and I use the word African. Sometimes I use the word African descent, but for the most part, I say African. And I'm noticing either my friends are starting to say African in conversation with me, or they will say Black and then they'll correct themselves and say, well, I'll say African because I know you like that. And I'm thinking to myself, don't say it just because I like it. Say it because you actually know it's the right word to use. And one person even asked me, why do you not use Black or African American? And I said, well, I think it's important that we think about how much colonial influence we have all around us, how we brush our teeth, how we comb our hair. Everything we do is rooted in colonial white supremacy. Everything. So we need to unpack that. We need to unpack that and decenter it and reconnect with our culture, which means we shouldn't be using a term that some European white man came up with to describe us. That's not how we should be describing ourselves. We should not be using terms that describe the countries in Africa that some European white man came up with. That's not how we should be describing those countries. We should figure out the original names of those countries that were given by Africans, and we should use those names to describe those countries. We know that there are several people in the party. I love this. When we are not interviewing, when we are introducing ourselves for different calls that we have, and we'll say, what location we're in the part of the world. And then if we're on indigenous soil, we'll give the name, the actual indigenous name of the area, and then we'll say what the colonized term is, what the colonized location name is. And so, I mean, even that I think is a great practice that we can practice in terms of studying what the original indigenous names are if you are on indigenous soil of people of the Western Hemisphere, and then practicing that, inserting that into your conversations, inserting that into your everyday life, where you are acknowledging, I'm on Cherokee land. If you're on Cherokee land, you might be on some other land with a different name, and you might need to study what that is and research that. So our struggle is one struggle, and we can unite. We've done it before, we have done it in the past, and we will continue to do it. We're doing it right now in other parts of the world. That unification that we have, that's going to build our capacity, you all. Our capacity is going to lead to us having power. And when we have power, that power is going to be among our people. And regardless of where we're located on the planet, it's going to impact us in a very positive way. It's going to enhance our self esteem. It's going to give us a new way of life and give us a new opportunity to think about, because the world we're experiencing is going to be very different. The people are going to be treating us differently. And because of that, we ourselves are going to be treating ourselves differently, because we're going to be in a higher position where we can make decisions. And I understand that that seems abstract and that seems abnormal to some of you because we haven't experienced that yet. But because we haven't experienced it yet, that's precisely why we need you all to join an organization that is working for justice. And if you're not ready to do that, then support a Pan-Africanist organization that is working for justice. As I said, use your skills, donate. If you don't want to donate money, donate books, donate food, donate opportunities such as canned goods. Help us do a canned food drive so all the proceeds can go to us feeding our people in communities that are food insecure. There are so many ways you can support our organization or another organization that is working for justice. But we're asking you all to take a stand and to make an acknowledgement in terms of what that looks like, because we can either benefit from you organizing alongside of us, or we can benefit from you helping to spread the word and telling other people about the work that these Pan-Africanist organizations are doing. That is going to require belief that things can change. For you to help promote Pan-Africanist organizations is going to require belief that things can change. And you have to ask yourself, do you believe that things can change? Because if you don't believe that, then I can understand why it would be hard for you to see the value of joining an organization yourself, or speaking to it and speaking about it so that other people can be convinced that it's something they need to do. Do you believe that things can change? Do you believe that we have the capacity to make a change? Do you believe that we are already working towards that? Do you believe that capitalism is crumbling? Can you name some examples of how that is happening? Do you believe that our people have the ability to unite and to organize together? Do you believe that? That's going to be the question. Because part of being in an organization that's working for justice is having an intention on why you're doing it. And if you don't have faith that things can change, and if you don't have faith that we have the capabilities and that we have the self-efficacy and the collective group efficacy to make it happen, then your heart is not going to be in it, which means you're going to join this organization and then you're going to fall off and not commit to it. So you must have faith that things can and are changing. You must have faith that things will be different. You must have faith that Africans can come together. You must have faith that Palestinian people can come together. You must have faith that indigenous people of the Western Hemisphere can come together. You must have faith that Asian descent people can come together, that Irish descent people can come together. Any person or people, I should say, who have been colonized, you must have faith. You must have faith, because faith is what has brought us as far as we have come. Faith is what has allowed us to be here today when so many of our ancestors were not able to take another breath because they took their last one. And what they did so that we could live, that is without question the only reason that we are here. So you must have faith, because somebody literally died for you to be listening to us today. Somebody sacrificed in some way, shape, or form for you to be here today. You may know who that person is, or you may not. And that's why we have to understand that this is bigger than us. That's why we have to understand that. That's why we can't go through this life just thinking that things are about us and that our lives are the ones that matter. We have got to understand that the decisions we make, the choices we make, how we decide to raise our families, how we decide to live in the areas we're living in, whether or not we speak up when we see people being treated badly, whether or not we speak up when we see poor or colonized people being treated badly, or non-male people being treated badly. That is really where it's going to count the most. Because if you don't have the courage, if you don't have the faith, if you don't believe that you can make a difference, then how could you believe that a group of people could change a reality and make it different? So we have to first check in with ourselves. We have to check in and make sure that we feel like we are capable to make a difference. It could be something as high as joining an organization working for justice, or it could be something that's a little less demanding, like supporting an organization that's working for justice. But either way, we all have a responsibility, you all, every single one of us. And it's going to start with establishing what that faith looks like. It's going to start with understanding that we are standing on the shoulders of greatness. We have Marcus Garvey. We have Amy Ashwood Garvey. We've got Elizabeth Sebeco. We've got Theodora Gomes. Some of these names I'm mentioning are still living today. Some of them are not. But we have so much legacy that is with us. We have so many people that have always wanted things to be better for us, and they have given everything they had, Shirley Graham Du Bois, so that we could be sitting here today. Kwame Nkrumah, they are counting on us. Sekou Touré, they need us to move forward so that we can push the needle a little bit more and change the conditions so that the world can be a better place. And it starts with us believing in ourselves so that we can believe in our people. This also helps us because we need to uncenter colonialism, as I said. So making a conscious effort to think about all the colonial things that you have in your life and to focus on decentering them, changing the language that you use so that you can reconnect to the culture, decolonizing yourself. It's going to take time. They had 400 years, 500 plus years to do that to us. So it is going to take time. But every time you use their terms, you are reiterating that colonialism was a good thing and it was okay and that you consent to it. So instead, let's resist that and let's be conscious of the fact that that is, in fact, what's happening. And let's figure out a way to reconnect to the culture. Let's decenter it. Let's resist it. Let's not accept that that is okay anymore. We can push back. We can fight this. And if you're not sure about that, just look at Haiti. Look at the people of Haiti. They are fed up and they are tired, and we are with them and we feel their energy because they are alive and they are fighting like their life depends on it, because it does. Look at the people in the Dominican Republic fighting like their life depends on it. Look at our Palestinian folks fighting like their life depends on it, because it does, you all. This is not a game. We are at war. And every time you think we're being dramatic, just count how many people are being mistreated because they're colonized, because they're differently abled, queer identifying, non-male. The list goes on and on and on, and the beat don't stop until the break of dawn. And we have just got to change that. That is simply not okay. No one should have to undergo oppression. No one should have to undergo it. And no one should suffer from poverty. No one should suffer from that. Those are just number one rules that we should just push out and understand. And it helps when we're doing the work to resist it. So, with that, we are asking you to consider what it means to tap into the belief that you have. And if you don't believe, then maybe you should do some research and be reminded of all the slave revolts that have taken place. Because people will tell you that we accepted slavery, but I would strongly disagree, because if we accepted it, then why were we so busy trying to escape? So research those slave revolts if you don't believe that we can do this. Research what the people of Haiti are doing if you don't believe that we can do this. Research how many times socialist Cuba has stepped in to assist African people if you don't believe that we can do this. Research how many times people have fought back and won, and the colonizer had to run away with their tail between their legs if you don't think that we can do this. Because it is quite possible that we can and we will do this. The question is going to be, do you have faith?
Deeper into Garvey's contributions, Garvey's journey. And so if you're not aware, Marcus Mosiah Garvey, he was born in St. Anne's Bay, Jamaica in 1888. And as a very young man, he was heavily influenced by the work and the vision of Booker T. Washington. And if you know, Booker T. Washington was really the principal forerunner of freaking conservatism here in the US. It wasn't this type of reactionary right-wing capitalism that poses as African conservatism today by people like Tom Ash, Clarence Thomas, and Dr. Ben Carson and all of these confused petty bourgeoisie Negroes and bourgeoisie Negroes. What Booker T. Washington had articulated was that he didn't believe that we would be accepted, ever be accepted into the US capitalist system. And I think he's 100% correct about that. And because of that, he felt that we should take up a real focus on gaining skills for our people that would allow us to be self-reliant. And that is why he was so instrumental in forming a lot of the uh, so-called historically Black colleges and universities, HBCUs, like Tuskegee, where Shakur graduated. That's the reason why he did that, is he wanted to ensure that we had the ability to create skills to be independent from the capitalist system in that sense. Marcus Mosiah Garvey, I think, took Booker T's, even though he was heavily influenced by Booker T. Washington, he took Booker T's analysis on a higher level. One way he did that is he internationalized the analysis. He didn't just focus on the US or Jamaica or any one microstate where we lived. He understood that our self-reliance needed to center Africa, that Africa needed to be the center of any equation that was talking about anything that was going to happen with our people. And Garvey also understood that everything we needed to bring about our forward progress was rooted in the African continent from a political, economic, cultural, spiritual, and every other way basis. So this is, in our view, one of the most important contributions that Garvey has made to us is by taking our struggle where it needs to go, home to Mother Africa, and defining our struggle from that standpoint. And that's what Garvey did over 100 years ago when he founded the Universal Negro Improvement Association, the UNIA, in 1914 in Jamaica, and coming to the US to try to seek out his hero, Booker T. Washington. He came here and unfortunately arrived after Booker T. Washington made his physical transition. So Garvey decided to stay in the US and utilize the resources the US has as, at that time, a developing capitalist country. Today, obviously, it's the leading capitalist country, to build the Universal Negro Improvement Association. And we think that that's a very strong strategy that our people need to embrace today. Like these people, I hear it 2 or 3 times a week from haters and racists and white supremacists and crackers and graham crackers. I hear it all the time. Well, if you don't like it here, why are you still here? And I tell them all the time, because see, the problem a lot of us have is that we feel like we have to exist under somebody else's rules. And we're not playing that game. So I tell them all the time, you've been stealing our resources for 500 plus years. So I'm here organizing to take them back. And as soon as we do that, we will be wherever we're going to be. But it won't be you that tells us where, because you don't have any, we don't give a damn what you think about who we are or where we should be or what we should be doing. I don't think it's humanly, I told somebody this morning, it's not humanly possible for me to care less what you think about our people and what we should be doing. We don't give a damn. If you took your last breath right now, we wouldn't give a damn. And I know a lot of you, but that's your problem. That's how we need to start talking to these people. And I think even 100 years ago, Garvey understood that when he came to New York City from Jamaica and began to lay the groundwork for the UNIA here in the US. And I think understanding that, it's important to recognize, just some key contributions that Garvey made in establishing the UNIA. With that Pan-African vision that I mentioned, Garvey had his mindset on ensuring that the UNIA was a worldwide organization. Even though he was based in New York at that time, in the late teens, he recognized that the organization needed to see itself involved in a global struggle, because that's the struggle that we're involved in. We're involved in a global struggle. We're not involved in just a struggle in the US. Anybody that says that just has no idea what's going on in the world today. There's nothing that's just related simply to a microstate that you live in. Nothing exists like that. And it really never did, but it certainly crystallized, crystal clear today, doesn't exist like that. You can have a car that has a Japanese name, like I drive a Subaru, and that car was built in Kansas City, Missouri. So this is a global economy, a global political environment. And Garvey understood that over 100 years ago. And so he wanted to build the UNIA to reflect that. And as Shakur mentioned, one of the tactics he used was creating the Negro World newspaper, which was displayed on the previous slide, a copy of it. And that Negro World newspaper was published in English, Spanish, and French in 33 countries. By the time 1920 came, this was the reality. So even without the internet, even without airplanes, even without all of the technological things we have available to us today to make reaching out so much easier than it was 100 years ago, these Africans figured out how to publish this newspaper in 3 languages and distribute it consistently in 33 countries. And that is phenomenal, because I think that if you're not inspired by that, then you're just not inspirable. I mean, that was clearly an example of what we could do when we put our minds to it and don't let our enemies define what our capacity is. And for Garvey and the UNIA, the concept of nation building from an African identity and Africa-centered perspective is also critical, because this is what we lack even today. You know, our enemies have convinced us to relate to the world through the vision of their realities. So if we live in the United States of America, for example, they have convinced us at the very least to see ourselves as African Americans. And so as long as we have that American in our title, we see this country as being an entity that we have to protect, because we identify with this country as being our identity. So everybody wants to protect their identity. So when the capitalist system does whatever it does, which never has anything to do with the interests of African people anywhere, a lot of us are very easily swayed to go on the side of US capitalism, even though that goes against our very interests. And there are so many examples. We don't even have time to talk about all the examples of what I just said, but we can just list some very simple and irrefutable ones when we enlist in their military to fight their wars. What did enlisting in World War II do for African people in this country? Nothing. We couldn't even when we were over in these countries. I'm reading a biography on Frantz Fanon right now. You know, Frantz Fanon wasn't born in this African empire. He was born in the Caribbean, in Martinique. But he went to fight for the French army during World War II. And he was in Europe fighting, and he came to the realization that he shouldn't have been there. He had no reason to be there. He was treated as if he was the dirt on the ground by the French military officials, even though he was there risking his life for Europe. He was treated just like every other African, like they were animals, like they were roaches. And so he came to the realization, why am I here? And that's the same for Africans all over the world, including the ones here who fought the US military in World War II and couldn't even sit with the white troops and officers, even though in Europe, when they captured Nazi troops, they ate in the mess halls with the US officers, and the African people fighting on behalf of this backward ass country couldn't go in there and eat. And so clearly it's not refutable by any sane person that we have no reason to have any allegiance to anything happening in these colonial capitalist countries. And the same was true for the Korean War, the Vietnam War, Iraq, Afghanistan, and none of these instances people respected. In fact, we serve as cannon fodder to fight for the capitalist system. That's why, you know, as evil as Adolf Hitler was in the 1933 Olympics, he was 100% correct when he said Jesse Owens winning those gold medals. The U.S. used African auxiliaries to win gold medals. That's absolutely, and it was correct last week. It's the same situation. all these years later, we will never be anything except auxiliaries for the capitalist system. And Garvey understood that. So he wanted to have an considered identity that was designed to win our people's hearts and minds over to the concept that our loyalty, our commitment, our vision be focused through Africa. That's how we achieve our forward progress and our liberation. And the problem primarily with Africans in the US is that we have become convinced that we don't have to have any connection to our history and our culture to move forward. We don't have to have any connection. No other people have that confusion here in this country except us. We think that we can move forward in this society relying totally on the resources, the information, the education provided to us by our enemies. And then we wonder why we struggle so much and why we continue to be at the bottom of this society. When all we do is basically mimic the capitalist system. That's the only, all these Negroes around here talking about wealth building and economics. The only model they've ever studied is the capitalist system that was built on our exploitation. So that's why when Africans build businesses, these businesses, for the most part, 99.9% of them, they're not doing anything to advance our people collectively. They serve the sole purpose of providing financial resources for the people that own them. And the people that work in those institutions are paid minimum wage and exploited just as they would be working for any other business in this capitalist society. You can't refute, you can get mad at me saying it, but you can't refute it. You can't say, well, no, there's plenty of models where Africans have started large corporations and they've done this. And I'm not, don't bring that contributing to HBCUs. That's nothing. Because the only reason why they do that is to avoid paying taxes, number one, and to create increase the petty bourgeoisie class so that people can graduate from those institutions and serve as middle managers in their capitalist enterprises. So that's not at all related to advancing the masses of our people. We are not confused by that nonsense. And so Garvey understood that. And it's important that we understand that because he understood that, this is why his work was sabotaged by the US government. And we'll use the example of Liberian rubber. And you see on the screen, if you're looking at it, Bridgestone Firestone has a large percentage of their operations producing rubber for tires in Liberia. And Liberia is the largest single place that produces rubber on the planet Earth in West Africa. And what Garvey did 100 years ago is he connected with the then Liberian President King, and he built a relationship. And what Garvey had talked to King about is we are getting education here in this backward cesspool. We will send engineers. We will send people to Liberia who can help you develop the rubber plantations to advance the people of Africa. And King thought that was a good idea. And so they established somewhat of a partnership to do that. This was Garvey's African-centered perspective again. And hearing this, we're telling you this history, which you cannot refute because you will sit here and listen to these crackers tell you today that this is a democracy and you can build wealth here. We have a history of trying to build economic and political independence for our people. And every time we've done that, it's been sabotaged by this government. So you have to be a damn fool if you believe them when they say that. You haven't spent 5 seconds studying our history. Because what happened then is a young J. Edgar Hoover, 24 years old, was billed as the director of the newly developed Department of Justice, which later became the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the FBI. And Hoover's first case was to jump on the Garvey movement and sabotage this relationship they were building with Liberia over this rubber. Because the capitalists understood that they wanted their multinational corporation to control this rubber and exploit it. They didn't want to have no African self-determination doing that. So they started on this process. And the way they did it is France wanted to invade Liberia to gain control of the rubber. We're talking around 1920 now. They wanted to invade Liberia to gain control of the massive rubber plantation. And the U.S. convinced France not to invade Liberia. And instead, France went to invade Vietnam for many reasons. One was to exploit Vietnam's rubber, because Vietnam has a considerable supply of rubber plantations as well. And obviously, if you know the history, you know that's why France went into Vietnam and could not defeat the nationalism of the Vietnamese people. And so the U.S. went there to bail them out. And that's why the U.S. got engaged in a war in Vietnam in the 60s and 70s. And they told you, well, we were doing it to fight communism. It had nothing to do with that. It had everything to do with protecting capitalist, multinational corporate interests. And that's always why they go into other countries. But going back to Garvey's movement, this sabotaged their relationship to Liberia. And because of that, that was a major setback for the work that they were doing. And even though they had other projects going, like the Black Star Line, the purchase of the 3 ships, they did not have the knowledge, experience, and education to understand. They were totally built buying ships, 2 of them that never sailed one meter because they weren't fit to sail, and the other one sailed a little bit, but not much. They were never able to perform the function that the Garvey movement wanted them to perform, which was to serve as an economic lifeline between Africa and Africans in every other part of the world. And so there was a lot of sabotage that went into their purchase of the 3 ships for the Black Star Line. That was facilitated in large part by the U.S. government, because they, of course, wanted to undermine any effort to bring about self-determination. And so that's why they did that. And Firestone ended up with a 100-year contract in Liberia that they signed in 1924 that is set to expire this year, but they've already signed the next one for the next 100 years. They just did that earlier this year. So our rubber in Liberia is still controlled by Firestone, who Kwame Nkrumah's government in Ghana proved from 1960 to 1966, when they had a socialist tire production in Ghana, they outproduced Firestone at that time. And that's why when the CIA overthrew Nkrumah's government, they closed the tire factory, the main tire factory in Takoradi, Ghana, and they sold it to Firestone. And Firestone never reopened it. They just wanted to eliminate the socialist competition, because in direct competition with the same resources, capitalism will never be able to beat socialism. And so this is what you got to understand, along with the fact that the Black Star Line, was created. The reason why Garvey gave it that name is because the largest cruise ship line at that time was a multinational corporation called the White Star Line. And it was a segregated star line. And its key ship was the Titanic. And that's why y'all watch, oh, it was such a great movie. That's why there's no Negroes in the goddamn movie, because we weren't allowed on the ship. So that's why Garvey called the shipping line he wanted to create the Black Star Line. And so we move forward and we just talk about Garvey's legacy. It's one of organization. I mean, clearly Garvey's influence has been felt 100 years later. You want to think about what your life is. And I talked about this last week. This man has been dead since 1940. And yet so many people around the world this weekend commemorate his born day because of the influence he has had on all of our lives. You got to think about how are people going to commemorate your life once it's physically over? So you can say whatever you want to say about Garvey or anybody else that's made a contribution to our people's struggle. But the fact is that this man, because of his work, had such an influence on people who came after him and who continued to make serious contributions to our people's struggle. People like Kwame Nkrumah, who, when he became the president of Ghana, and that was solidified in 1960 when Ghana became a republic, after gaining independence initially in 1957, Ghana created its flag, which we have displayed on the screen there, and it has the Black Star in it. And Nkrumah did that in honor and recognition to the work of Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Garvey never went to Ghana. He never made it to Africa. But Nkrumah, intelligent as he was, understood that a great influence in his life and his work was the work of Marcus Garvey. Just like a great influence in the life and work of the All African People's Revolutionary Party today is because of Garvey's work. The Universal Negro Improvement Association still exists. They still organize. You should join them. And they're clearly doing that because they're still influenced by the work of the Honorable Marcus Mosiah Garvey. Malcolm X, El Hajj Malik El Shabazz, his parents were members of Garvey's UNIA, right? Louise Little, Malcolm's mother, who came from the Caribbean island of Grenada, was a member of the UNIA, along with Malcolm's daddy, Daddy Little. They were members of the UNIA. Mr. Little was a preacher in the UNIA, and this is why he developed attacks. Attacks were developed against him by the Black Legion in Omaha, Nebraska, and they ended up killing him. And Manning Marable, who died in 2011, wrote that biography on Malcolm and did his best to create suspicion as to whether Mr. Little was killed or not. I don't know what his motivations were for doing that, but we have no evidence to suggest that there was any reason why Mr. Little would kill himself. And so he was obviously influenced by Marcus Garvey. And so my point is Malcolm's parents were Pan-Africanists in the UNIA. So obviously it's incorrect to say that Malcolm X's whole being and whole reason why he existed was because of Elijah Muhammad. That's ahistorical. That's undialectical to say that. Certainly, without question, Elijah Muhammad had a tremendous impact on Malcolm X. We're not saying he didn't. Elijah Muhammad had a tremendous impact on most of our people. No question about that. But to say that he's the only reason that Malcolm X existed and Malcolm's parents were Pan-African members of the UNIA, that's just undialectical and ahistorical. Clearly, Malcolm had that spirit. What Elijah Muhammad did is help bring that out. It was already there. He just helped bring it out. And Elijah Muhammad himself was a member of the UNIA. And there are many forces within the Nation of Islam today who, for whatever reason, that they feel like they need to do that, want to deny that Elijah Muhammad was a Garveyite and a member of the UNIA. But, you know, the UNIA has documents. They have documents that demonstrate that Elijah Muhammad was a member when he was Elijah Poole. So, you know, let's stop the nonsense, do our study and our research, and understand and respect the history and legacy that we have available to us today. There's no question that Garvey has influenced, and you can't mention Marcus Mosiah Garvey, as Shakur did already advised us, without mentioning Amy Ashwood Garvey and Amy Jacque Garvey, because they played a central role to developing the vision and the work of the UNIA as Marcus Mosiah Garvey did himself. And it's our job today to continue to build on the legacy Garvey left us 100 years ago. And the best way you can do that, as we say all the time, is be involved in organization, be involved in liberatory organizations. I'm not talking about joining some nonprofit. Nonprofits are not going to bring about revolution, and revolution is what we need. So don't fool yourself into thinking, okay, I'm doing this, so I'm making my contribution. No, you're not. We need independent, revolutionary organization, and we need people building from that standpoint. And so you should take it upon yourself to join an organization that has that mission. Because if you don't, if you say you respect people like Marcus Garvey, like Malcolm X, like Assata Shakur, like Theodore Gomez, etc., then you have the responsibility to do the same thing all those people have done. Because you can't talk about this. Oh, excuse me, I'm allergic to that and oppression. But you can't talk about any of those people without talking about organization. None of those people did anything on their own. Marcus Garvey had the Universal Negro Improvement Association. Malcolm X had the Nation of Islam. And when he left that, he formed the Organization of Afro-American Unity and Muslim Mosque Incorporated. He formed two organizations. Elijah Muhammad had the Nation of Islam. Kwame Nkrumah had the Convention People's Party and the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Secretary had the Democratic Party of Guinea and the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Amilcar Cabral had the African Party for the Independence of Guinea-Bissau and the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. Asante Shakur had the Black Panther Party and the Black Liberation Army. Amy Jacque Garvey had the Universal Negro Improvement Association. We could go on and on and on and on. There are no people in our history who we commemorate for making a contribution to our people's forward progress, who just operated as individuals doing their own individual thing and not being committed to an organization that held them accountable to fulfilling the aspirations of the masses of our people. So whether you join the Universal Negro Improvement Association and the African Community Leagues today, they still exist. You should go online and find out where they are and join them if that's what you want to do. Or you can join the African People's Socialist Party. They would certainly have a website where you can find out about them. You can join the Black Alliance for Peace. You can do work with them. You can join the Malcolm X grassroots movement. You can join the All-African People's Revolutionary Party. You can join the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People. And don't tell us, well, they're not militant enough. They're more militant than you because they're engaged in work. And all you're doing is flapping your gums. Flapping your gums is not going to intimidate anybody. White folks not afraid. You know, these Negroes, 1,500 of them took these guns to Stone Mountain, the Ku Klux Klan headquarters, and the white people got out their cars with these Africans. These people are not intimidated of us doing this performance art. They're not scared of us. The only thing that will bring fear to this system is when we organize and demonstrate the capacity to bring them to their knees. That's when they'll be afraid, and not a moment until then. So stop jiving around and join an organization. And that's how you make your contribution and show how much you respect Marcus Mosiah Garvey and his contributions. And we want to thank you all for being with us today. And we want you to join us next week when we talk, where are all these anti-African identity videos coming from and why? Why are they coming? What's the objective behind it? Very, very, very important. Very important for us to talk about that. And we still have the flyer up from our event yesterday, just because we wanted to say we had a very successful Black August and Pan-African Women's Day event here in Sacramento. We want to recognize our young comrade Anthony, who did a wonderful presentation on Black August. And we want to recognize Comrade Shakur, who did an outstanding presentation on Pan-African Women's Day. And we had a good turnout. There was good food. My wife made bean pies that were quickly devoured, and it was a wonderful day. So if you want to know more about APRP programs, the upper left-hand QR code rather has different programs, this one included. You can find out more and listen to all our programs and let people know. You can go to the Forward Ever Shop and support our effort to provide fashion that has revolutionary analysis attached to it. And you can go to Hood Communist, which is an outstanding Pan-Africanist blog, and then go to www.aaprp-intl.org and join All African People's Revolutionary Party. You can find out how to do that there. I had a young person this week reach out to me and tell me she's heard us say that, and she went and joined, and she attended her first work study meeting. I don't know this young African, but these are the kind of things when they happen, and they don't happen as much as I wish they would, but they happen often. I have to say that. And these are the things that just bring joy to my heart to hear that. I hope if you're listening that you continue moving forward in this process and continue building. We definitely need you, and we're glad you're here. You want to donate to the APRP, go to Venmo at A-APRP or PayPal at AAPRP, no dash. Burkina Books on the bottom right-hand corner. Become a sponsor, contribute what you can a month, even if it's just $5 US lousy, Abraham lying about freeing us Lincoln dollars, then do that. And buy my book and tell people, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. We use proceeds to fund our anti-fascist work. You can only buy it on Amazon. I don't want to hear it. They got the printing press. I don't. So that's why I use them. I'm using the master resources to bring them down. Or whatever. Backwards never. Enjoy the rest of your evening.